My relationship with my family had always been strained, to put it mildly. It felt like walking on a tightrope, every conversation a careful balancing act. I remember the silence that would fall, thick and sudden, whenever I joined them for our weekly online family meeting via Connect app. Just last Saturday, as my face appeared on the screen, the usual chatter in their living room abruptly ceased. My brother, Owen, and his wife, Sophia, shared one oft-hear knowing glances, a silent communication I was never privy to. My mom, Catherine, offered a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, her expression a little too bright. "Oh, Chloe, you managed to join us." Mom chirped, her voice a little too enthusiastic. "Did you manage to tear yourself away from your precious legal briefs?" A small, almost imperceptible sigh escaped my lips before I could stop it. I forced a polite smile. "Yes, Mom, I made sure to clear my schedule. I was looking forward to our chat." My dad, Marcus, let out a dismissive snort, his eyes still glued to the financial news ticker scrolling across his large monitor in the background. "A minor miracle," he muttered, loud enough for the microphone to pick up. "Our high-powered lawyer actually remembers her family exists outside of a courtroom." His tone was laced with its usual sarcasm, a familiar barb that I'd learned to mostly ignore over the years. "Dad," I began, trying to steer the conversation to safer waters, but Owen, ever eager to needle me, cut me off. "Chloe, perfect timing," Owen announced, a smirk playing on his lips. "Tell us, did you bankrupt another unsuspecting company this week? Or perhaps just a hostile takeover?" He then turned to Sophia, elaborating with a theatrical wave of his hand. "You know Chloe, Sophia, she only speaks in billable hours and depositions. She has this incredible knack for turning any pleasant gathering into a legal seminar." Sophia giggled, a light, airy sound that always felt a little forced when directed at me. "Oh, he's not wrong, Chloe," she chimed in, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "Remember that Thanksgiving dinner? You spent a solid hour explaining the intricacies of intellectual property law to poor Uncle Arthur. He looked utterly bewildered, bless his heart. I was just trying to offer some helpful advice." I started to defend myself, then trailed off, realizing the futility of it. It was always like this, a gentle, persistent undermining of my profession, my personality, my very being. Our family conversations, or rather, their monologues occasionally punctuated by my attempts to connect, invariably circled back to their lives. Their plans, their needs. Liam and Isabella, Owen and Sophia's children, were usually a fleeting, pixelated presence in the background. Their excited squeals a brief distraction. Sophia would then launch into a detailed account of their upcoming social calendar, their extravagant plans for home renovations, or the latest gossip from their affluent circle of friends. Dad and Mom would nod along, interjecting with their own boasts or complaints. Whenever I attempted to shift the topic away from my work, to share a simple anecdote or ask about their well-being, an awkward silence would descend, quickly broken by another of their self-absorbed narratives. It was during one such online meeting that Dad, with a carefully rehearsed casualness, brought up the topic of their finances. "You know, Chloe," Dad began, leaning into the camera with a conspiratorial air, "your mother and I have been thinking. This old house is getting a bit much for us to manage, and we've been looking at some lovely condos downtown. Closer to the amenities, you understand." Mom nodded enthusiastically. "Oh, it would be wonderful, dear. A little less upkeep, and we could finally get that new kitchen I've been dreaming of." I waited, a familiar sense of dread coiling in my stomach. I knew where this was heading. "The thing is, Chloe," Dad continued, his voice dropping to a more serious tone, "the down payment on those places, well, they're not insignificant. And with my retirement portfolio not performing as well as I'd hoped." He let the sentence hang in the air, his gaze unwavering. "We were just thinking, you're doing so well at Sterling and Partners Law, a successful lawyer like you. Perhaps you could see your way to helping your old parents out? Just a little something to help us secure our dream retirement spot." Before I could even formulate a response, Owen jumped in, his face beaming with excitement. "Speaking of dream spots, guess what, everyone," he announced, practically bouncing in his chair. "Sophia and I have been planning something absolutely amazing for our 10th wedding anniversary." Sophia leaned in, her eyes shining. We're going to Italy. A whole week in Tuscany, staying at this gorgeous private villa. We're even thinking of taking Mom and Dad with us, sort of a pre-retirement celebration for them too. Mom clapped her hands together. Oh, Owen, Sophia, that sounds absolutely divine. Tuscany. Imagine. They all looked at me then, a collective, expectant gaze. Owen cleared his throat. And Chloe, since you're such a generous daughter and aunt, he said, his smile a little too wide. We were hoping you might want to contribute to our little family memory-making fund, you know, as an anniversary gift, and a thank you for all those times you've, well, you know. I managed a weak, non-committal smile, my mind reeling. My own wedding was just a few months away, a detail that seemed to have completely slipped their minds, or perhaps, was conveniently ignored. Again. I thought, a wave of weariness washing over me. When will they ever take my life, my plans, my wedding, seriously? The conversation, as always, revolved around them, their desires, their expectations of my financial support. My value to them, it seemed, was directly proportional to the balance in my bank account. This pattern of expectation and subtle emotional blackmail had been the backdrop of my life for as long as I could remember. I, Chloe, the diligent daughter, the successful lawyer, was also their ever-reliable ATM. I'd paid for my own way through Northwood Law, juggling scholarships and part-time jobs, driven by a fierce desire for independence. Yet, here I was, still caught in their financial web. But I sensed a shift in the air, a subtle change in their usual tactics as my wedding to Noah approached. This whole mess, this painful unraveling, really began about 2 months before the wedding day. Dad started acting, oddly whenever I brought up wedding plans. It wasn't overt negativity, but a strange secretiveness that set my nerves on edge. He'd lower his voice to a conspiratorial whisper when on the phone, or quickly minimize his laptop screen if I walked into his home office unannounced. Sophia, my sister-in-law, began giving me these knowing little smiles, accompanied by vague, tantalizing comments. Chloe, darling, you are just going to adore what we have in mind for your special day, she'd say, her eyes twinkling with a mysterious delight. Even Owen, who usually feigned disinterest in anything that didn't directly benefit him or involve his work at Apex Solutions, started dropping cryptic hints about unforgettable surprises. I won't lie, a part of me, the part that still yearned for their genuine affection and involvement, got a little excited. A wedding is supposed to be a joyous milestone, a celebration shared with loved ones, isn't it? My family wasn't wealthy by any stretch, and I, fiercely independent, wasn't expecting them to contribute financially to the wedding itself. Noah and I were handling all of that, but all this sudden secrecy and hushed planning made me wonder. Perhaps they were organizing a truly special bridal shower, or an intimate rehearsal dinner at a charming local restaurant. Whenever I tried to gently probe for details, Dad would just pat my hand and say, "Patience, Chloe, patience. Good things come to those who wait." His uncharacteristic warmth was almost more unsettling than his usual indifference. To be perfectly honest, I was taken aback that my family was showing any interest in my marriage at all. Beyond the potential for a party they didn't have to pay for, it felt out of character. I decided to formally announce our wedding date and chosen venue during one of our Connect app calls. "So, Noah and I have set the date," I began, trying to keep my voice light and cheerful. "It's going to be a lovely, intimate ceremony at that little Italian place downtown, the Gilded Grape, on Saturday, June 14th. The reaction was not what I'd hoped for. Owen and Sophia exchanged a horrified look. "June 14th? Sophia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh, Chloe, no. That's the exact day we're supposed to fly out to Tuscany for our anniversary trip." Owen groaned dramatically. "You're kidding me. We've had those non-refundable tickets booked for ages." Dad frowned, stroking his chin. "Well, that is rather inconvenient, isn't it, Catherine?" Mom looked flustered. "Oh dear, yes, Marcus. What a dreadful clash of dates. We were so looking forward to that trip with Owen and Sophia." A heavy silence filled the virtual room. The unspoken implication hung there, their pre-planned vacation took precedence over my wedding. I took a deep breath, trying to keep the disappointment from my voice. "Well, the venue is booked, and the invitations are ready to go out, I said, forcing a calm I didn't feel. And please, don't worry about gifts or anything like that. Noah and I are covering all the expenses. We just want you to be there to celebrate with us. There was a subtle shift in their expressions. The prospect of a free celebration, with no financial obligation on their part, seemed to somewhat mollify them. Well, if you put it that way. Dad said slowly. I suppose we could try to rearrange our flights, perhaps leave a day later. It would mean cutting the trip short, of course, but for your wedding. His voice trailed off, implying the immense sacrifice they would be making. They reluctantly agreed, or at least, they gave the appearance of reluctantly agreeing to attend. A few weeks later, I tried to arrange a dinner for them to finally meet Noah properly. He was, after all, going to be their son-in-law. I'm planning a small dinner at our apartment next Friday to formally introduce Noah, I told Dad over the phone. It's really important to me that you're there, Dad. And Mom, Owen, Sophia too, of course. Of course, Chloe, my dear, Dad had answered, his voice smooth as silk. Wouldn't miss it for the world. As long as no urgent business comes up, I'll be there. But on the day of the planned dinner, just hours before, a message pinged on my Connect app. It was from Dad. So terribly sorry, Chloe, the message read. A last-minute crisis at Innovate Dynamics. Have to fly out to meet a crucial international client. Completely unavoidable. We'll have to do this another time. Perhaps we can all properly meet Noah at the wedding itself. Mom quickly followed up with a call. Oh, Chloe, your father is just so incredibly busy these days, she sighed sympathetically. Innovate Dynamics really keeps him on his toes. He feels dreadful about missing tonight, truly. I stared at the messages, a familiar weariness settling over me. It wasn't the first time. Dad had a long history of prioritizing his work or what he claimed was work and his important social engagements, like golf with his friend Bob, over significant events in my life. And so, the dinner to introduce my fiancé to my family was unceremoniously cancelled, another casualty of Dad's perpetually critical schedule. A small, nagging doubt began to surface in my mind. Is it really work this time? I wondered. Or is it something else? Is he avoiding Noah for some reason? The thought was unsettling, but I pushed it away, telling myself I was being overly suspicious. On the day of my wedding, the beautiful June sun streamed through the windows of the Gilded Grapes private dining room, illuminating the carefully arranged flowers and place settings. But as I stood there in my wedding dress, my bouquet trembling slightly in my hand, a cold dread began to seep into my heart. The rows of chairs reserved for my family were starkly, painfully empty. Mom, Dad, Owen, Sophia, even little Liam and Isabella, none of them were there. Not a single one. A knot tightened in my chest. Something must have happened, I whispered, more to myself than to anyone else. A car accident? A sudden illness? My mind raced through a dozen terrible scenarios. I fumbled for my cell phone, my fingers clumsy with a rising panic. I called Dad. Straight to voicemail. I called Mom. The call was rejected after a single ring. My hands shaking, I sent a flurry of frantic texts via Connect app to Owen and Sophia. Where are you? Is everyone okay? The ceremony is about to start. No reply. Only a deafening, agonizing silence. Noah, my wonderful, steadfast Noah, gently squeezed my hand. His calm, hazel eyes, full of love and concern, met mine. Chloe, my love, don't worry, he said softly, his voice a soothing balm on my frayed nerves. I'm sure there's a perfectly reasonable explanation. They wouldn't intentionally miss our wedding. Something urgent must have come up. His suit, a perfectly tailored charcoal gray, looked magnificent, and his gentle smile, usually reserved just for me, now held a reassuring strength. Noah's parents, seated in the front row, looked at me with expressions of deep concern and sympathy. But Noah, ever decisive, ever my rock, took charge. After a brief, hushed consultation with the officiant and his parents, he turned back to me. We'll proceed with the ceremony as planned, my love, he said, his voice firm but gentle. This is our day. We won't let anything spoil it. And so, with the ache of my family's conspicuous absence a heavy weight in my heart, I said, I do, my voice barely a whisper. In front of those empty, accusing rows of chairs, Noah's hand held mine, strong and unwavering. The look in his eyes, a mixture of profound love and fierce protectiveness, told me that I was enough for him, that our love was enough. Even without the validation or presence of my family, the wedding ceremony, despite the gaping hole left by my family, was completed. Our friends, Noah's wonderful family. They all did their best to make it a joyous occasion, but I couldn't shake the gnawing anxiety, the unanswered questions. I couldn't just sit still, pretending everything was fine. Later that evening, after we'd returned to our new apartment, the one we'd lovingly decorated together in anticipation of our married life, I remembered my Framebook account. I rarely posted anything myself. It was mostly a tool to passively keep up with my family's curated online lives. A window into their world that often left me feeling more like an outsider than a participant. My fingers, still trembling slightly, navigated to Sophia's profile. And there it was. Posted just 3 hours earlier, while I should have been walking down the aisle, while my heart was breaking over their absence. A series of brightly lit, professionally filtered photos. My entire family, Dad, Mom, Owen, Sophia, Liam, and Isabella, all beaming, raising champagne flutes in a toast. They were standing on the sun-drenched terrace of a magnificent Tuscan villa, Villa Aurelia. The name proudly displayed on a wrought iron sign in one of the shots. The backdrop was a breathtaking panorama of rolling hills and cypress trees, a scene of idyllic, luxurious escape. Sophia's caption was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive cruelty, the most incredible wedding anniversary celebration in Tuscany. Chloe is such a dedicated career woman, she can rarely make time for these precious family moments, so we're making the most of it, just us. Tuscany Villa Aurelia family love blessed making memories. My blood ran cold, then boiled with a sudden, furious heat. The comment section was even worse. Dad had replied with a jovial, "Our Chloe is brilliant, no doubt, but she still needs to learn how to truly enjoy life. Work isn't everything." After all, Sophia had added another gem, "So true, Dad. Some people just don't understand the importance of family traditions and creating lasting bonds. Their loss." And Mom, my own mother, had commented, "It's simply wonderful to escape from all the stress and drama of wedding planning. This is pure bliss. So relaxing." She was there in the photos, radiant in a new designer sundress and oversized sunglasses, looking utterly carefree and joyful. Worlds away from the daughter she had abandoned on her wedding day. My breath hitched. The phone nearly slipped from my numb fingers. Noah, who had been watching me with growing concern, moved to my side and looked at the screen over my shoulder. I saw his jaw tighten, his eyes narrow with a cold fury I had never witnessed in him before. He gently took the phone from my hand and pulled me into a tight embrace. I can't believe this," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Chloe, this is monstrous. It shows exactly how little they truly value you, how little they care." He held me tighter, as if trying to shield me from the raw pain of their betrayal. "But I'm different, Chloe," he whispered into my hair. "You know that, don't you? You mean everything to me. Everything." He sat beside me on the sofa, his arm a comforting weight around my shoulders, and gently stroked my hair as he watched my hands tremble, clenching and unclenching in my lap. I had been about to reach for a glass of water, but now I couldn't trust myself to hold it. "No one, absolutely no one, has the right to hurt you like this," he continued, his voice filled with a protective anger. "You are an incredible, strong, beautiful person, Chloe. Inside and out. I consider myself the luckiest man alive to see the amazing woman they are too blind, too selfish, too cruel to appreciate." His words were a lifeline in the churning sea of my emotions, a soothing balm to the searing wound in my heart. But the pain, deep and visceral, didn't magically disappear. It throbbed with a life of its own. I sat there, curled against him, for what felt like an eternity, my throat constricted, tears blurring my vision as I numbly scrolled through more of their jubilant posts on his phone. Vineyard tours, gourmet meals under starry Tuscan skies. Laughing family portraits in front of ancient fountains, all meticulously time-stamped and geotagged to Villa Aurelia. A place I'd never even heard of until this moment of devastating revelation. Their perfect family vacation had clearly started 2 days prior, a carefully orchestrated, secret escape. A strange calm, cold and sharp as ice, began to settle over the initial shock and rage. I didn't call them. I didn't text. I certainly didn't comment on their sickeningly cheerful framebook posts. Instead, I carefully poured myself a glass of the champagne Noah had opened earlier, my hand surprisingly steady now. And I started to think. Really think. Noah, ever attuned to my needs, quietly went to the kitchen and returned with a mug of steaming hot chocolate for me and a strong coffee for himself. He sat beside me again, his presence a silent source of strength. He listened patiently as I recounted, in a flat, emotionless voice, the years of subtle manipulations, the constant financial demands, the casual disregard for my feelings. Then, drawing on his experience as a COO at Innovate Dynamics, he began to offer practical advice. In situations like this, Chloe, as painful as it is, it's crucial to act based on facts, not just raw emotion, he said gently but firmly. You're an excellent lawyer, far better than I in these matters, so you understand the importance of documentation. Right now, we need to meticulously record everything, gather every piece of evidence, from a legal and a personal standpoint. He then hesitated for a moment before picking up his tablet from the coffee table. He logged into what looked like a secure internal system. I probably shouldn't be showing you this, Chloe, he said, his expression serious. But given the circumstances, this is your father's activity and performance record at Innovate Dynamics. It paints a rather troubling picture of his recent contributions, or lack thereof, and some questionable expense claims that have raised red flags. It was in that moment, watching him navigate the high-level corporate interface with such familiarity, that the full scope of his professional standing truly hit me. He wasn't just a senior executive, he was clearly at the very top echelons of Innovate Dynamics. The level of access he had, the information at his fingertips, was not something an ordinary manager would possess. Noah, I began, my voice barely a whisper, are you? A small, almost rueful smile touched his lips. Yes, Chloe, he confirmed quietly. I was recently promoted. It hasn't been publicly announced yet, it's slated for next week, but I've been appointed the new CEO of Innovate Dynamics, which means, technically, I am now your father's direct superior. I stared at him, momentarily speechless. The implications were staggering. He quickly added, his eyes full of tenderness, but that's secondary right now, Chloe. What's most important is you, protecting you. I will not stand by and allow them to treat you this way. They have underestimated you, and they have clearly underestimated us. His kindness, his quiet determination, his unwavering support, it was like a steel rod being inserted into my spine. It gave me the strength I desperately needed. The first thing I did, with a grim sort of resolve, was to log into the joint bank account I still, foolishly, maintained for family emergencies. An account that had, over the years, become a de facto slush fund for their various whims and financial shortfalls. As I suspected, a withdrawal of $400 had been made just last Friday, transferred directly to Dad's personal account. The memo line simply read, travel expenses. I scrolled back through months, years, of Sophia's and Mom's old framebook posts, a digital archaeology of their lives. And there it was, Mom had been dropping hints about a very special, top-secret family retreat for weeks, complete with wistful comments about making memories that last a lifetime. So, this Tuscan escapade wasn't a spontaneous decision. It was premeditated. It was planned without me, planned around me, planned in deliberate, callous disregard of my wedding day. By midnight, the raw, bleeding hurt had morphed into a cold, white-hot determination. I opened my laptop, the familiar glow of the screen a small comfort in the darkness. With Noah by my side, offering quiet suggestions and technical assistance, I began to document everything. Screenshots of every damning framebook post, every arrogant comment, every gloating selfie. Digital copies of bank statements showing the steady drain of funds. A meticulously constructed timeline of their lies, their false promises of wedding surprises, their feigned interest. All juxtaposed against the reality of their secret vacation plans. I rarely cried. I'd learned long ago that tears were a sign of weakness in my family's eyes. But as the evidence mounted, as the sheer, calculated cruelty of their actions became undeniable, I felt hot. Angry tears pricking at the back of my eyes. These weren't tears of sadness or self-pity. They were tears of pure, unadulterated rage. What do you think we should do now, Noah? I asked, my voice hoarse, as I stared at the damning compilation on my screen. He put his arm around me, his touch gentle but firm. First, he said, his voice calm and resolute, we prepare. We protect you legally, financially, emotionally. We gather every piece of information, every shred of proof. We build an unshakable case, not for a court of law, perhaps, but for the court of your own conscience, your own future. Then, when the time is right, when they inevitably come crawling back, we will confront them with the undeniable truth of their actions. But for tonight, my love, he said, his voice softening, we rest. You need to rest. Tomorrow will be a long day, and the days that follow may be even longer. But we will face them together. He gently closed my laptop and led me towards the bedroom, his arm a steadfast anchor in the storm that had just ripped through my life. The storm broke sooner than I expected. It was about a week after the wedding. Noah had been officially announced as the new CEO of Innovate Dynamics 2 days prior. The news had undoubtedly sent shockwaves through the company, and, I suspected, through my family's blissful Tuscan bubble. If they'd even bothered to check their work emails while escaping stress. That afternoon, Dad was summoned to the CEO's office. Noah later recounted the meeting to me with a grim sort of detachment. He had laid out the facts. Dad's consistently poor performance over the last 18 months, his department's failure to meet critical targets, and the serious concerns raised by the internal audit regarding his expense reports, which included several large, unsubstantiated claims that suspiciously coincided with the dates of their Italian family trip. Noah, in his capacity as CEO, had presented Dad with two options: a transfer to a newly created, significantly less prestigious role in business development for the Oak Haven regional office, essentially a demotion to a remote, struggling branch, or an early retirement package, effective immediately. Dad, according to Noah, had been initially incredulous, then blustering, then, when faced with the irrefutable data of his own failings, utterly deflated. He had left Noah's office pale and shaken. That evening, my phone, which had been ominously silent from my family for days, suddenly erupted. A text message from Dad, short and panicked. Chloe, we need to talk. Urgent. What is going on with your husband and my job? Sophia called twice, back to back, leaving increasingly agitated voicemails on Connect app. Owen sent a barrage of messages. Chloe, Dad is freaking out. He says your Noah is trying to fire him. You need to sort this out. This is insane. Just call us back, FFS. I didn't answer any of them. A cold, hard knot of resolve had formed in my chest. Instead, I logged into Framebook and posted my first photo in months. It was a simple, understated shot, a close-up of my left hand, resting on Noah's. Our new wedding bands gleaming softly in the lamplight of our living room. No caption. No tags. Just the date stamp of our wedding day. That single image, that quiet declaration of my new life, my new allegiance, was like dropping a match into a barrel of gunpowder. At exactly 9:44 p.m., my phone exploded. Notifications cascaded across the screen, a relentless torrent of digital desperation. Message after message, call after call, from every platform imaginable. Dad was in full-blown panic mode, his texts a jumble of accusations, pleas, and thinly veiled threats. Owen, for once, actually sounded genuinely concerned, though I suspected his concern was more for the potential disruption to his comfortable lifestyle than for my well-being. Sophia's Connect app voice messages escalated from bewildered to outright hysterical. By midnight, I'd counted over 290 messages, texts, Connect app DMs, framebook comments, missed calls, frantic emails. Even a few desperate voicemails on my old, rarely checked landline. The last one, a garbled, tearful message from Dad, simply said, "We're cutting the trip short. Flying back tomorrow. We need to talk to you, Anne." And James. I mean, Noah. This is all a terrible misunderstanding. Noah sat beside me in the quiet of our living room, his arm a comforting presence around my shoulders. His expression a mixture of anger at their audacity and concern for me. He had already made his professional move regarding Dad the day after Noah's CEO appointment was finalized. I had been in our home office, ostensibly working, but mostly just staring blankly at legal documents, the words blurring before my eyes. I heard Noah's voice from the living room, quiet but firm, conducting a call. His tone was different from his usual warm, affectionate manner with me. It was the voice of Noah, the CEO, calm, measured, and utterly resolute. "Yes, Marcus," I heard him say, and my head snapped up. He rarely called my father Marcus. "The decision regarding your future at Innovate Dynamics stands. It is based solely on your documented performance and a thorough review of your adherence to company policy and ethical guidelines over the past several years." A pause, then, "Your options remain as communicated, the role in Oak Haven, or the voluntary separation package. You have until the end of the week to inform HR of your decision." I walked to the doorway of the living room, my heart pounding. Noah was standing by the window, phone to his ear, his back to me. He must have sensed my presence, because he turned slightly, met my eyes, and gave me a small, reassuring nod before continuing. "No, Marcus, this is not a personal vendetta, nor is it open for negotiation," he stated, his voice like chilled steel. "Innovate Dynamics has clear performance metrics and a strict code of conduct. Your department has underperformed for 6 consecutive quarters. Furthermore, the internal audit has flagged significant discrepancies in your expense reports, particularly those coinciding with your recent unauthorized absence during which you claimed to be on company business in Europe, when in fact, you were on a private vacation in Italy." The voice on the other end of the line, distorted but unmistakably Dad's, grew louder, angrier, tinged with disbelief. Noah remained unruffled. "Your assertion that you were unaware of the company's position on such matters, or of my new role as CEO, is frankly difficult to credit, Marcus. The official announcement was circulated company-wide. Your failure to acknowledge critical company communications is yet another reflection of your disengagement." A longer pause. Then Dad's voice, now laced with a dawning, horrified understanding. "Wait. Italy? How did you? Chloe's wedding. You're Noah? Chloe's Noah?" Noah's expression softened almost imperceptibly as he looked at me. "Yes, Marcus," he said, his voice now quiet but carrying immense weight. "I am Noah Ryan, your CEO. And, as of a week ago, your son-in-law. The son-in-law whose wedding you and your family chose to skip in favor of a taxpayer-subsidized vacation. It would appear from these expense reports." A strangled gasp came from the phone, followed by a clatter as if the receiver had been dropped. Muffled, frantic voices could be heard in the background, Mom's high-pitched exclamations, Owen's alarmed interjections. They were clearly still together, likely back at Villa Aurelia, their idyllic escape now shattered by the cold, hard reality of their actions. Dad eventually came back on the line, his voice trembling, stripped of all its usual bluster. "Noah. Mr. Ryan. CEO. I had no idea. Chloe never said. We didn't know it was you she was marrying. If I had known you were her fiancé, my boss. You received a formal wedding invitation 3 months ago, Marcus." I spoke up then, my voice surprisingly steady as Noah held the phone out slightly so I could be heard. It clearly stated Noah's full name. There was no RSVP. I also called Mom to confirm attendance. And she told me you were all far too busy with important prior commitments. Chloe. Dad gasped, the sound a mixture of shock and dawning terror. You're there? Listen, this is all a colossal misunderstanding. A terrible, terrible mistake. We were just on a family holiday. A long-planned anniversary trip for Owen and Sophia. We had no idea your fiancé was him. At that moment, Owen's voice, shrill and panicked, broke through. Noah. Chloe. Listen to me. We only just found out yesterday about Dad's situation at work. About the Oak Haven thing. Everyone's been incredibly upset. We were trying to figure out how to contact you, but the Wi-Fi here at the villa is spotty, and you missed my wedding, Owen, I said, my voice like ice. You deliberately chose to abandon me on the most important day of my life. You didn't give a single thought to me, to my feelings, to Noah. Chloe, darling, Mom's voice quavered, we were just trying to. Enough, Noah said, his tone final. He ended the call. He turned to me, his eyes filled with a deep, sorrowful anger. Honestly, Chloe, he said, shaking his head slowly, I knew your father was professionally negligent. I'd seen his performance reports. I'd met him briefly at a couple of shareholder meetings. He should have recognized my name. At the very least known I was senior management at Innovate Dynamics, but for him not to even connect my name with the man his own daughter was marrying. It's beyond comprehension. His words, though spoken with a pained gentleness towards me, pierced my heart. My own father couldn't even be bothered to remember the name, let alone the face, of the man I was building my life with. It was a new, bitter depth of their indifference. The ensuing deluge of messages and calls from my family only confirmed their shallow, self-serving nature. They hadn't suddenly developed a conscience or a shred of remorse for their cruelty. They had simply realized that their ATM, their compliant Chloe, was now married to the man who held their financial future, their very livelihoods, in his hands. My importance to them had skyrocketed, not because they loved me, but because my husband now had the power to make their lives exceedingly uncomfortable. What are you going to do, Chloe? Noah asked later that night, as we sat in the quiet aftermath of their digital onslaught. His arm a comforting weight around my shoulders. I looked at the glowing screen of my phone, still pulsing with their desperate pleas. I'm going to ignore them, I said, a strange sense of calm settling over me. Just as they ignored my wedding, my calls, my existence. I am now going to ignore theirs. Noah smiled, a small, sad smile, and leaned in to kiss me gently. Well said, my love. I finally understood. They didn't know who I was, not really. They didn't know who Noah was. They only knew what they wanted from us. For years, I had felt like a supporting character in their drama, a minor player whose only role was to facilitate their desires. But now, standing beside Noah, I felt a flicker of something new, something like agency. Perhaps, finally, I was ready to become the protagonist of my own story. The next evening, as predicted, they arrived. Their flight must have landed in the late afternoon. I was in our apartment, a knot of anxiety and resolve tightening in my stomach. Noah had insisted on being there, having cut short an important investor meeting. He understood this was a confrontation I needed to face. But he wasn't going to let me face it alone. At precisely 7:12 p.m., the intercom buzzed. Through the small video screen, I saw them, Dad, Mom, Owen, and Sophia, looking rumpled, jet-lagged, and thoroughly wretched. Dad was clutching a ridiculously oversized, garishly wrapped gift bag, clearly a last-minute airport purchase. A pathetic attempt at a peace offering. I buzzed them in, my hand steady. When I opened our apartment door, they were a tableau of forced cheerfulness and ill-concealed panic. Chloe. Dad boomed, his voice unnaturally hearty. There you are, darling. Why haven't you been answering your phone? We've been worried sick. He thrust the gift bag towards me. A little something from Tuscany. We missed you terribly, of course. I stared at them, my expression unreadable, my silence a heavy weight in the hallway. Mom wrung her hands, her eyes darting nervously between me and the expensive Italian leather handbag slung over her shoulder, no doubt another souvenir from their stress-free vacation. Sophia was attempting a sympathetic pout, though it was somewhat undermined by the deep tan she'd acquired. Only Owen still retained a sliver of his usual arrogance, though even he looked uneasy. Chloe, about Dad's job at Innovate Dynamics, he began, stepping forward. There's clearly been some kind of misunderstanding. Noah needs to. Just then, the elevator doors down the hall chimed, and Noah stepped out. He was immaculate in a dark business suit, his expression cool and unyielding as he walked towards us. Marcus, Noah said, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable authority. Dad's forced bonhomie evaporated. His face went ashen. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. And Noah, he stammered, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and dawning comprehension. Mr. Ryan. CEO. I didn't realize. Is it true, Marcus? Noah continued, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. That you and your family chose to abscond to Italy on a trip partially funded by questionable expense claims, thereby missing your own daughter's wedding? He paused, letting the accusation hang in the air. And that you only decided to cut short this essential family bonding experience when you received notification of your impending performance review and potential reassignment? Dad's face crumpled. He looked from Noah to me, his eyes pleading. Chloe, is he really the CEO of Innovate Dynamics? He whispered, as if the reality was too horrifying to fully absorb. Yes, Dad, he is, I said, my voice clear and strong. But that's not really the point, is it? The point is, you chose a luxury vacation over my wedding. You lied to me. You abandoned me. And now, the only reason you're standing here, looking so distraught, is because Noah's position has direct consequences for your life, your career. Owen stepped forward again, his voice placating. Chloe, Noah, listen. We genuinely didn't know. If we'd had any idea that Noah was Dad's boss, that he was, well, so important, we never would have. You never would have what, Owen? I interrupted, my voice sharp. Never would have treated me with such callous disrespect? Never would have assumed I was too insignificant to matter? That has to be the most pathetic, self-serving excuse I have ever heard, I continued, the words tumbling out. Fueled by years of suppressed hurt and anger, Noah's promotion to CEO was announced internally at Innovate Dynamics weeks ago. His name, his position, it was all there in company-wide emails. On the corporate intranet. The only reason you knew nothing about my fiancé, about his role, is because you have absolutely no genuine interest in my life, in who I am, in what matters to me. Dad's voice trembled. Chloe, please. We're family. Family is supposed to help each other out, right? Forgive and forget. Noah, who had been standing silently beside me, a pillar of strength, finally spoke. Marcus, he said, his voice devoid of any warmth, someone who demonstrably places so little value on their own family, on their own daughter, has absolutely no right to invoke the concept of a family when it suits their agenda. A chilling silence descended upon the hallway, broken only by Mom's muffled sob. Dad's shoulders, already slumped, seemed to collapse further. Despair etched itself onto his features. Even Owen, for once, looked utterly defeated, his gaze fixed on the floor. Sophia hid her face in her hands. I personally informed you of the company's decision regarding your continued employment while you were in Italy last week, Marcus, Noah continued, his tone relentless. A decision based on your sustained underperformance and clear ethical lapses. Employees who do not value integrity, who do not value their commitments, be they professional or personal, are not an asset to Innovate Dynamics. Your transfer to the Oak Haven branch, or your acceptance of the early retirement package, are the only options on the table. It was only after you received that formal notification, it seems, That you suddenly developed an overwhelming concern for your daughter's wedding and your future son-in-law's identity. Sophia lifted her head, her eyes red-rimmed. We didn't know, she whispered, her voice barely audible. We truly didn't know how important he was. Dad suddenly lunged forward, dropping to his knees on the plush carpet of our apartment hallway. He reached out, grasping at Noah's impeccably polished shoes. Noah. Mr. Ryan. Please. You have to reconsider, he begged, tears streaming down his face. I've given 20 years of my life to innovate dynamics. I can do better. I'll prove it. Just give me another chance. For Chloe's sake. Catherine rushed to his side, pulling at his arm. Marcus, get up. Don't humiliate yourself like this, she cried, her voice hysterical. Then she turned to me, her face a mask of desperation. Chloe. You have to say something. Tell him. Make him understand. He's your father. Noah looked down at the prostrate figure of my father, his expression unreadable. He then stepped back slightly, disengaging from Dad's desperate grip. This decision, Marcus, Noah said, his voice calm but firm, has absolutely nothing to do with Chloe or my relationship with her. This is a purely professional matter, based on your documented performance, your contributions, or lack thereof, to innovate dynamics. And your adherence to the company's code of corporate ethics. Oak Haven offers you an opportunity to demonstrate a renewed commitment. I sincerely hope you take it. Owen, seeing his father's debasement, seemed to find a last shred of misguided courage. But if we'd known Chloe's fiancé was the CEO, we would never have gone to Tuscany. We would have been at the wedding. This is all just a massive, unfair misunderstanding, he blurted out, his voice rising in panic. Sophia shot him a horrified look and clapped a hand over his mouth, but it was too late. His words, his pathetic, self-incriminating admission, hung in the air. And in that moment, something inside me finally, irrevocably, snapped. The carefully constructed dam of years of patience, of quiet acceptance, of swallowed pain, burst. So that's it, isn't it? I said, my voice trembling with a cold, hard rage I didn't know I possessed. That's what this all boils down to. If Noah hadn't been the CEO, if he'd just been some ordinary man, my wedding, my happiness, my feelings, they would have meant absolutely nothing to you. I looked at each of them, my gaze lingering on their shocked, fearful faces. All these years, I continued, the words pouring out like a torrent, all these years, I've been nothing more to you than a convenience. A reliable source of income. A useful ATM when your own finances ran short. Someone to bail you out of your messes. To listen to your endless complaints, to celebrate your trivial achievements while my own were dismissed or ignored. You didn't care about my graduation from Northwood Law, a top-tier school I got into and paid for myself. You didn't care about my career at Sterling and Partners. You didn't care about my engagement to a man I love. A man who respects and cherishes me in ways you never could, never even tried to. But now, I said, my voice dropping to a venomous whisper, now that my husband holds your future in his hands, suddenly I matter. Suddenly. Your family thought. I took a deep, shuddering breath. Well, I've had enough. I am done being your safety net, your emotional punching bag, your convenient afterthought. I don't want your pathetic excuses, your belated apologies, your transparently self-serving displays of affection. I want you out of my life. All of you. Consider this my official declaration of independence. From this moment on, we are done. I am severing all ties. Do not contact me. Do not come near my home. Do not involve yourselves in my life or Noah's life in any way, ever again. You made your choices. Now, I'm making mine. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy, and suffocating. Dad remained kneeling on the floor, his face buried in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Mom stared at me, her mouth agape, fresh tears streaming down her pale cheeks. Owen looked like he'd been slapped, his face white with shock. Sophia was openly weeping. Noah stepped slightly in front of me, a protective shield. "I believe you've heard my wife," he said, his voice low and firm, leaving no room for argument. "You've caused Chloe more than enough pain. It's time for you to leave. Now." Slowly, agonizingly, they picked themselves up. Dad, helped to his feet by a visibly shaken Owen, looked like a broken man, all his bluster and arrogance gone, replaced by a hollow, vacant despair. Mom, still sobbing, grabbed his arm and began to pull him towards the elevator, her movements jerky and uncoordinated. Sophia stumbled after them, supported by Owen. The last thing I saw, as the elevator doors slid silently shut, was Dad's devastated, uncomprehending face, Mom's tear-ravaged features, and the utter desolation in Owen's eyes. The oversized, forgotten gift bag lay on the floor, its garish wrapping a stark reminder of their pathetic, too little too late gesture. When the elevator doors closed, sealing them away, a profound silence descended. I stood there, trembling, the adrenaline slowly ebbing away, leaving me feeling strangely hollow, yet lighter than I had in years. Noah turned and gently, tenderly, pulled me into his arms. He held me close, his embrace strong and reassuring, as the tears I had held back for so long finally began to fall. "You were incredible, Chloe," he whispered into my hair, his voice thick with emotion. "You were so strong. You said everything that needed to be said. It's over now. It's truly over." I clung to him, burying my face in his chest, the scent of his familiar cologne a comforting anchor in the emotional storm. "I'm free," I whispered, the words tasting strange and new on my tongue. "I'm finally free." He held me tighter. "Yes, my love," he said softly. "You are." Looking out our apartment window a few minutes later, I saw them emerge from the building. Their figures small and indistinct in the gathering twilight. They huddled together on the curb, waiting for a taxi, their movements slow and defeated. Dad no longer looked like the arrogant, self-assured patriarch I had always known. He just looked like a tired, defeated old man. Watching their taxi pull away, disappearing into the city traffic, a profound sense of release washed over me. It was the true, unadulterated feeling of freedom, a freedom I had unknowingly craved for my entire life. In the months that followed, the dust began to settle, both personally and professionally. Marcus, my father, refused the Oak Haven transfer. He opted for the early retirement package. But his years of financial mismanagement and extravagant lifestyle meant his pension was significantly smaller than he had anticipated. The funds were quickly depleted by outstanding debts and his inability to adjust his spending habits. He and Mom were forced to sell their large, mortgaged house. With nowhere else to go, they moved in with Owen and Sophia. Their cramped townhouse, already strained by Owen's modest salary from Apex Solutions and Sophia's part-time income as an interior coordinator with few clients, became a pressure cooker of resentment and recrimination. Their framebook posts, once filled with boasts of lavish dinners and exotic vacations, dwindled to infrequent, vaguely unhappy updates. Meanwhile, my life with Noah blossomed. I resigned from Sterling and Partners Law, my departure amicable and understanding. Shortly thereafter, Noah, with the full backing of the Innovate Dynamics board, offered me the position of senior counsel in their corporate legal department. It was a challenging, exciting new role, and working in the same company, albeit in different spheres, brought a new dimension to our partnership. We bought a beautiful, modern house in Willow Creek Estates, a serene, upscale community nestled by a lake, far from the oppressive shadows of my former life. Our home was filled with light, laughter, and the quiet joy of shared dreams. 6 months after our tumultuous wedding day, we hosted a small, intimate gathering in our lakeside garden, a belated wedding celebration. A reaffirmation of our vows, surrounded by Noah's loving parents and our closest, truest friends. There were no grand pronouncements, no dramatic confrontations. Just love, acceptance, and the promise of a shared future. Connect app messages and calls from Dad, Mom, Owen, or Sophia when they occasionally, desperately, tried to reach out, went unanswered. Their numbers eventually blocked. My phone, my life, was now filled with photos of Noah, of our friends, of the beautiful new life we were building together, brick by loving brick. The invisible chains that had bound me to my family for so long had finally been broken. I was no longer their ATM, their emotional support animal, their forgotten daughter. I was Chloe Ryan, a woman loved, respected, and, most importantly, seen. I knew, deep down, that completely erasing the past, the years of hurt and disappointment, might be impossible. The scars would likely always remain, faint reminders of battles fought and won. But I had made my choice. I had chosen to build a future with the man who loved me unconditionally, with people who valued and respected me. I would no longer be a convenient accessory in someone else's life. I was the main character in my own story now. And as I stood on our terrace with Noah, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and rose over the tranquil waters of Willow Creek, his arm around my waist, his lips brushing my temple, I felt a profound sense of peace. "You are my everything, Chloe," he would often whisper, his voice filled with a sincerity that still, after all this time, made my heart ache with a sweet, overwhelming joy. And in those moments, I knew, with absolute certainty, that I had finally found my true north, my safe harbor, my forever family.